Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AnthroPuzzled podcast. I'm your host, Abby Letzinger, and every 2 weeks we'll explore how anthropologists are forging unique career paths beyond the usual academic sphere. Tune in, get inspired, and start piecing together your own career puzzle within the world of anthropology. On today's episode, we have Dina Rivera. She graduated from the University of South Florida with a master's in applied anthropology with archaeology and forensic focus. She currently works as a communications director for the Register of Professional Archeologists. How are you doing today, Dina?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Abby.
Awesome. So what exactly is it that you do and how is it important in regards to anthropology?
Well, because I am the staff archaeologist and communications director for this nonprofit work where we are promoting standards and ethics in archaeology, which I think is very important to make sure your archaeology is done with standards and ethics in mind for both the descendants and for the people all involved. And we have been exploring ways to promote those things, make it easier for people to find that information. Standards and such vary by state, by region and such. So we try to make it easier for people to find access to the information they need in order to be the best archaeologists that they can be. So in my particular portion of that, I handle all of the nonprofits' internal and external communication, facilitating things between the board and the other parties. Also, there are people who call me and ask where I need such and such a specialization of an archaeologist in this region, maybe Nova Scotia. Who can I call? And I would give them a list of people who are in that area that are registered. So our mission is to create a community of these archaeologists that believe in these standards and ethics so that it, like any other doctor or engineer that practices, that they have a certification, that they have an accountability, and that they have something to fall back upon when they need information.
So what are some of the biggest challenges you have when promoting these kinds of standards?
The biggest challenges I have personally sometimes is just really miscommunications and misinformation. You have a lot of information out there. Not all of it is great. Not all of it is from reputable sources. And for those people who have committed to being in the register, they have committed to providing a reputable source, to providing a evidence-based and science-positive perspective on archaeology, and still have the empathy to deal with the descendants of these people and deal with these very specific situations. So, I think one of the greatest issues is having that line of communication.
Are there any misconceptions about archaeology that you encounter a lot?
Yes, especially when you have very slick and well-financed documentaries like the ones for Atlantis or Ancient Aliens and such like that. You have a lot of these people who expect a conspiracy out of archaeologists, that we're hiding something, that we're being paid to not give them the real story, when the truth is that archaeologists love to talk about what they do. They love to talk about their work. And then sometimes the misunderstanding about the science part of archaeology, that we need to have it in a context, and to bring us a rock with this without any information of where it came from, how it came to be there, or anything else, might not have an answer that these people might want. So we have had, I would say, conspiracy theorists, I suppose, calling over and over again about stories that they've heard and proof they believe that they find. And we try to direct them to their local archaeologist society or their university. So hopefully somebody there can bridge that connection.
Yeah, I've heard there's a lot of conspiracy theories in regards to how the Great Pyramids were built and what Stonehenge is about, and that aliens did it. But if you really think about it, how insulting is it to the people of those times to believe that they couldn't do it themselves and that they needed some extraterrestrial assistance to create something so massive and extraordinary, honestly.
Absolutely. It is an absolutely insulting thing for these descendant communities to be told that their ancestors couldn't possibly have done what their ancestors really did do. And how that sort of thing ends up feeding into political perspectives and the delegitimization of entire populations, because you couldn't possibly have done the things you're doing. And so, in that fact, that archaeology can be incredibly political, and in our organizations and how we try to promote that we be an advocate for history and be an advocate for these real stories that have been brought by these archaeologists, so the work that they're doing, especially those who are of a global majority but a US minority. There are more and more indigenous archaeologists every year. There are more and more Latin archaeologists and African archaeologists every year. And so the ability for us to support them in promoting their interpretation of their own ancestral stories is an important part of our community.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then on the other hand, you have the individuals who believe that the earth is only 6,000 something years old. So anything that's older than that was placed here by the devil or something.
Right. And then, those are the stories that people are told. And you believe these stories for all of the people who have programmed you to believe these stories. And it's hard to overcome that kind of programming, especially when science isn't an answer. Science is a question. Science is how you get to an answer, not the answer. Because it's always going to change. We're going to find something new. There's going to be new technology. But people don't want to trust. Oh no, you found out that, women were also warriors in these ancient sects. That's not true. It can't possibly. But we have the evidence, or that children had a very prominent position in their own families, that they were given way more respect than we would see in maybe a Eurocentric sort of household where the children are to be seen and not heard or something like that. So getting a message past the teachings of your childhood is a difficult challenge for any archaeologist, but I think it's one of those that are very unique for people who are public facing, because they have to translate the archaeology into a digestible social media message.
Are there any particular strategies that you use to reach students or like individuals who are like in their early career portion of archaeology?
I like to absolutely encourage that professionalism and these ethical standards, but I also like to coach it in a manner that is memorable and humorous. Like, I find that people remember things that they find funny, or a strange story, or a very interesting sort of anecdote. One of the things that I had taught was on the importance of knowing the local history before you go into an area. And it started with me writing on the board, "Suck the monkey." So all the students, very, very perplexed, are reading what's on the board. And I'm addressing that sugar in Florida started in one sort of way, in the Caribbean, where they did it a very different way. It comes to Florida in a very industrialized manner. But sugar is really three different products. It's the sugar itself, it's the molasses, and what you make out of the molasses is rum. So if you're in sugar and you get to rum, and then you're in Florida, you'll eventually get to pirates. So the heavily taxed rum would be smuggled by these pirates in the husks of old coconuts. And one of these sorts of code words that they had for drinking the rum from the coconut was called "suck the monkey." And when I read that, I absolutely had to put that into a paper, because that was such a gripping and funny little story that people can understand. And then something funny for them to take home with them. So you reach a lot of people with something that makes it past the academic idea. You reach out in languages that people can use, or you shift the way that you talk about something to more personal based, to the kind of academic, this is the framework, this is what we do, this is how we're following it, and such and such. So if you're being a public facing sort of archaeologist, you have to start with, I did this because of my family. I did this because of my person, where you connect with your audience on a personal level, or you give them something to laugh at.
That is fair. Now, how did you get into archaeology? Like, what was your experience like that kind of brought you into it?
Oh, wow. I'm going to be really cliche and say that I loved Indiana Jones as a kid. But, but as I got more into archaeology, I realized he's a really bad archaeologist because he destroys every temple he touches. And I started in college as a literature major, and I didn't really like criticizing people's heart and soul that they put into their words. It didn't feel right to me. And I went on a global perspectives course, and that went to Turkey and Greece, and we went through different sites all through Greece and Turkey. And I fell down a mountain, and I crawled under ruins, and got found out by the Turkish military when I wandered off and on a site way out into the woods. But I think one of the most profound things was when we got to go to Troy, and you see the walls of Troy, and you can see a very thick black line from where the city was burnt to the ground. And from everything beneath that line is Trojan artifacts. And everything above that line are Greek artifacts. So you see that very tangible proof that this war, at least some part of this story happened. And that was so like moving to me. I've always loved Greek myths. I love Greek mythology. So I ended up deciding that that's what I really wanted to do, was go into archaeology and all the happenstance and mishaps that go along with it.
I think that's really cool that even though it started out as like, oh, I just love Indiana Jones, and then realized to be like, wow, he's kind of, that's not how you should be doing that. And I think that's what a lot of students think when they first go into archaeology is like, I'm going to be like Indiana Jones. I get to go on these cool adventures, get to visit these cool places. And then they start and they're like, I'm in someone's backyard, just digging a hole. But then you have a select few who like work on really cool projects like the Terracotta Army and, getting to do excavations in the pyramids and all that kind of stuff. But they're not as frequent as an opportunity as some people might think getting into archaeology.
No, and I would agree that like most 80% of archaeology is done, I think, what would be called compliance archaeology, where there is a construction or something that's being built, a large mall, a huge passageway, pipeline, where an archaeologist has to check that area and see if they're going to impact anything majorly. Those are like the cultural resource management stuff. And they do encounter some very, very cool things, but their main job is to make sure that the construction is not affecting them. So it may be that, hey, just go around this spot, or hey, don't disturb this area, but cover it. Those sorts of ways that they can manage and save some archaeology, but they can't save all of them. And there's a lot of corporate stuff that happens. And yeah, we do know that those things can get a little bit hairy. Most of the archaeologists that are a member of or registered at the register are CRM archaeologists, and they are doing so many of the coolest things that I've ever heard. Some of them are working in legislation. Some of them are lobbying for, environmental health. A lot of them are working for the National Park Service and preserving historic sites that way. And archaeology is one of those things that can be a passion, because I feel like when I was in college and you ask people, what was your major? Oh, I'm business, or I'm finance, or this. And you ask somebody in archaeology and they get that crazy look in their eyes. Archaeology. So it can be like a drug. It's a bit of a height. And yeah, we always go to cool places, but there's so much stuff right under your feet. Florida has been continuously habited for over 20,000 years. So there is beautiful things, springs that have wonderful resources underneath them. We found entire canoes that were preserved in the silt and the muck really well. Lots of things that were incredible finds, so that it would be in manner of speaking, that it's not as storied as on historic channels like these other places with the big names elsewhere. But that should change. There's so much underneath your feet, and that would help people preserve it if they knew that.
Mm. Are there any projects or publications that you worked on that were like super exciting for you?
I don't know how super exciting it is, but I do work on what is called the Archaeological Ethics Database. It's not thrilling, but it's one of those essential things that We have an intern every year. I was one of the early interns when I got into the register. They kind of sniped me right out of college. I presented on the ethical imperative for archaeologists to participate in virtual spaces, because if you don't, then you have people who believe in a flat earth and Atlantis in there. If you leave a vacuum, it'll be filled with the misinformation. So it was an important thing. So they snatched me up for that ethical internship where we have collected and curated an entire list of anything that has to do with ethics and archaeology in the intersection, whether it's archaeology during warfare or how to prevent collections from getting damaged, how to deal with NAGPRA and, the proper ways of respectfully repatriating artifacts and remains and everything in between. Our most recent intern she was from Central America. So a great deal of her work, and given the current climate, how to do conflict archaeology. What sorts of things are you going to have to deal with? How do you protect these artifacts? What happens in the aftermath? So future students will be able to come back to this resource and be able to create an ethical framework for their papers, or somebody who's trying to start a principal investigator can find out what's going on in their location and see what's the important things for them to do. So it's, like I said, it's not a thrilling kind of project, but I think it is a very essential one. And the reason that we have interns do it every year, because the students are the ones that are exposed to the most current events. And in that way, it keeps this database fresh and it keeps it connected to the people.
Okay. Are these interns usually like grad students, or are they like have already graduated?
They're usually grad students, yes.
Okay. So, since you went to grad school, do you have any like advice for individuals who might be looking to go into grad school for archaeology?
Yes. Go look into the people that you want to work with. If the location where you're at is not important, if you're able to move, go find somebody who's doing the thing you want to do and go work with them. And even if they are somebody who is supposedly famous in the industry, they are always looking for ways to pass on the information and knowledge. And for those who are really looking into a graduate program, understand that archaeology is incredibly flexible. You can study the sound waves that go through the cliffs as a manner of communication, or the ancient DNA mapping of a certain region. You can do just about anything in archaeology that you're interested in. So it doesn't have to be limited to one idea of dig a hole, find a pot, bring it to the museum. That's just one possible idea. Though I did do a dig in the middle of Central Florida in the hottest part of summer, and I don't recommend that.
Yeah, as cool as archaeology is, I don't think I'd be able to tough it out because I like my air conditioning and inside toilets, not like having to rough it out in the woods. So it's as cool as it is, it's not for me.
That's just one part of archaeology, being in the field.
Yeah.
And I had anticipated that that would be the career path for me when I started grad school, and I got my acceptance letter and I was very excited for it. And then I got into a very major car accident with a drunk driver. So everything I thought about what my career would be had to shift overnight, literally. And you find out that there are a great deal of laboratory positions. Like I said, I spent my whole grad school career in the basement at USF identifying remains, and to find out where did they belong, to send them to the right families and such. And we found one that was just in a paper bag in a closet, and an ancestor who had no identification, that had been part of an old collection from a rich landowner from years and years ago. And nobody had seen it, nobody had found it, nobody knew what to do with it. And it turned out that the person who owned it was a bootlegger. He owned a great deal of speakeasies in southern St. Pete, had to do with Capone. And so my treatise then was next to, is this having to do with this particular speakeasy? Is this a forensic case? Or because the speakeasy that he built was right next to a native mound, were they native remains? And it turns out that the latter. It turned out that whenever they built that particular speakeasy, they tucked into the land, and he just kept the bones he found.
That's not ethical.
No, but I mean, it was 1930s, 32, I believe. So it was probably nothing on their even radar what an ethical idea is. A lot of our newest theories on how best to treat ancient remains, native remains, or ancestrals comes from the newest generations of archaeologists that are coming up that I really want to support. The indigenous ones, the Latino, the Black, all of these that have been minoritized in America.
Do you feel that by getting an anthropology degree and, working in ethics has kind of broadened your perspective and viewpoint on the world?
Like it has colored it in a different way. Like in a matter, you can now see what has motivated this particular theory or what has brought this into practice. And sometimes it's because of just inherent biases, and that we have to look at these again to go, maybe this person was biased because of the way they were taught at that time. And now we can look at it again from another lens, add those Ben Franklin lenses with the different colors.
So with the emergence of, new and improved quote unquote technology, has that kind of shifted individuals' perspectives on archaeology and the ethics of it?
Very much so, because a great deal can be done by satellite, by laser scanning, by ways that are non-invasive, that some populations are a little more apt to let you do. You can come in and do something that's non-destructive or non-invasive in that manner. There's also the uplifting of these marginalized voices within this profession. So we're promoting them in their perspective and letting them tell the stories of their own ancestors. So that has changed. Just the ability to share information on social medias has made it very accessible. So that I can tell everybody of my people, of the Taino of Puerto Rico, the Borican of that island, and people can now use that information to reconnect to their ancestral homeland in ways that they weren't able to do before. I love archaeology and that unearthing of these stories that never make it into the historic record. It's ways of giving back voices to these unheard. I get to talk to these amazing people who are doing incredible work, like the recording of the echoes, communication, diving ships that carried the enslaved. That one was diving with a purpose. It's their whole organization that they dive slave ships to bring back these stories that have been unheard. So that is, I think, one of the best things about archaeology is to be able to use every little bit of technology that's out there to uplift these voices that have been lost.
And I feel like it also makes it a lot easier to communicate with, archaeologists from all over the world, to get perspectives. Because, like, you could be working in, let's say, Peru, and you need, like, a translator for something, or you found some ancient cultural heritage items, and you're like, I don't know what any of this is. I can now look up and research someone who might specialize in that. Because there was this one girl when I was in college who her whole specialization was in olive jars. And when we would go through, like, we had an extra credit assignment of like, oh, if you go to the archaeology lab, you can help them sort through all the rocks and pottery shards that you have. And so I went up there and I was like sorting through them. I'm like, these all look the same to me, so I'll try my best. And this girl would just come over and be like, that's an olive shard, that's an olive shard. And I'm just like, they look the same. What do you mean? So being able to like, specialize is just like that. It's just something that they pick up, and you're like, well, if anybody needs like help identifying olive jars, she's your girl.
Right? Oh, absolutely. The ability to specialize is incredible and to communicate with people across the world. Matter of fact, one of my colleagues is in Romania right now, and they're working on a project and they're laser scanning crania and dentition. And he was having a hard time with the lasers bouncing off the reflective teeth. So we're kind of trying to troubleshoot back and forth. Well, maybe we can put some of this on it. Well, then we have to wash it off. What happened to this if it causes some kind of problem? So yeah, there's exactly that ability to collaborate across the world with people. And I think that is very, very cool. And especially when I have a friend of mine who does animal remains, faunal remains, and can pick out a mouse scapula out of a pile of bones. And I'm like, woman, are you kidding me? A mouse scapula. But then, mine is human bones, so I can, that I can do that with bits of human remains. And like, you can do that with animals. One human animal was enough for me. Those 300 bones that a human animal has, that's enough. Thanks. You got to go and memorize what a cow looks like, what a deer looks like, what a mouse looks like, so that you can identify it in the historic record.
Wow, I could never.
He would set up all the tables, and each table would have a shard of bone, and then you had 1 minute to identify, write it down, then move to the next table. Identify, write it down, and move to the next table. And then he would throw things in there like a piece of coconut shell or a bone that wasn't human. And you're like, sir, that's not fair. But after a while, you start looking for these little identifying marks like, oh, okay, this is a little vein opening here, or this one has a little notch here. One of them, he said that there was the middle carpal bone has one little notch that comes up for its middle finger. That's how we identified that particular carpal. So you have identifying marks, and after a while of over and over and over repetition, you eventually get it. But those tests, I don't know. Those were personal.
Oh god. Yeah, that's insane. Like I don't think I'd ever pass those, but there's a reason that when you go in to be a forensic anthropologist, there is so much training involved. One of the it's not a piece of advice, but it's kind of like a hack that you really shouldn't do that archaeologists mention is like, oh, if you're out in the field and you don't know if it's a bone or a rock, just lick it. And it's like, no, don't do that.
Please
This
don't
is
lick the bone.
this is a human remain. You don't know what that is. Don't put that in your mouth or how long it's been in the ground.
What's been on it? You're going to give yourself dysentery. Yes, there was a sign on our forensic lab at the university that said, very big, bold letters, do not lick the bone. Because in ancient days, when you didn't have ways of testing the difference between bone and it would stick. A bone would stick to your lip and not to a rock wouldn't stick, or anything else doesn't stick to your lip. You would lick your lip and stick it to your lip, and it would stick if it was bone.
That's
Gross, huh? It's very gross. And we're glad that that's not a practice that is permitted any longer.
That's good. It cracks me up because like we had a sign like that in our forensic anthropology lab as well. And I'm just like, we know it's bones, so what person is sitting here licking them when they know for a fact it is bone? Like somebody did something to get that sign put up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're definitely right there.
Goodness. Well, before we get to our final four questions, was there anything we haven't discussed today that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know. I think so far we've run royal lists.
Well, we'll hop into the final four. So the first question is, what is the best piece of advice that you would offer to someone who's interested in getting into archaeology?
Talk to archaeologists. Talk to people who are doing the work in your area. Talk to all kinds of people, because you're going to find people who don't like what they do. And then they're going to tell you the bad parts of the job, which are good advice too, to keep in mind. And then you're going to talk to people who are just enthusiastic about every moment. And yeah, talk to other archaeologists. They're everywhere and they want to talk to you. They want to talk about their jobs, their projects.
Are there any changes you'd like to see in the industry?
A lot more uplifting of marginalized voices. I mean, it's difficult to pull any industry into change, but especially an industry that is looking backwards so much as it does, there were a great deal of people who become very territorial about theory or their way of doing things and don't want to deconstruct the things that need to be deconstructed. So I think a lot more work on the Black, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Asian, all of these others who are looking at their own history and theirs should have at least as much funding as any of these other large projects.
Do you ever feel like the archaeology that's done in like other countries on ancient ruins or whatever is kind of romanticized a little bit more than doing domestic archaeology?
I think you are right. Yes, it is. That also comes with the who's putting funding on those projects. Who's putting, National Geographic put out another one on Atlantis. Like if that kind of money had gone into something in maybe on something like Cahokia or in the other real large stories that could be way more interesting, I think, or valid. Stories are valid. Let me go back there. I mean, we don't have proof that Atlantis doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean that Atlantis doesn't exist. We just don't have proof. There are so many stories that have the proof that need that kind of funding and just as much romanticization from these bigger channels that could go into the indigenous people here or the islands of the Caribbean, all of these other stories that are really incredible too. They don't have to be fantastical. It doesn't have to be aliens that do it. They're people who are doing wonderful, amazing things. They need that cool camera watching them too.
And you've kind of touched on this question a little bit, but is there anything else that you just absolutely love about your job in the industry you work in?
I don't know. Finding something is such a dopamine hit. It's like, finding gold. It is absolutely, we're treasure hunters, but our treasure is knowledge. And when you find something that you can point to a certain time and a certain people and say with the legitimacy of everything that you have learned and how to find that this is true and this is the voice that you're bringing back, I think that that is a beautiful thing. And it gets me so excited when they find something like something that sets the population date back in America, where they found saying, oh, people are coming from this land bridge, where we know that they've been here a lot longer than that, that people have been using boats a lot longer than we have been suspecting them, that they were living on ice that's no longer there. So there's no trace of what's been left behind. One of the biggest secrets of archaeology is just because there's no evidence doesn't mean there's no evidence. We just haven't found it yet. We haven't looked everywhere. We haven't looked deep enough. There's so many things out there, especially out in the water. With water table rising, we're losing more and more every day.
And I think that's the cool thing about archaeology is like you can, with the field, you can never be done. There's always more to find or, more to theorize on. So I don't feel like it's going to be an industry that's going to go out of business anytime soon.
Absolutely not. No, archaeology, as much it is about the study of the ancient and what we're looking at these material remains, we're always leaving material remains behind. Every time, every day, you're leaving something behind that somebody's going to look at later. And it's constantly evolving. There will be times where we can use different atomic ways of setting time or different carbon dating, new ways of dating it that's more accurate. And we'll be able to find all sorts of, one of them was something about muons, these particular particles that go through rock and how they were able to measure that. And it was way over my head in the sort of astronomy sort of science as applied to archaeology. And that was very cool.
Well, the final question for you is where can listeners learn more about you and what you do?
Well, they could always come to the register at the rpanet.org and look at everything that registering as an archaeologist will help you with and how we create that community to support people in their careers, in their journeys, whether they're coming in as an archaeologist, as an academic, as a student, or they're coming to be an archaeologist from some other industry. Some of them start as geologists, some of them start as historians. There's, like I said, there's so many different ways to be an archaeologist as there are archaeologists.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here and, getting to talk about all things archaeology. I had a great time.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Well, you have a fantastic rest of your day.
And you too. You have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you again.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of AnthroPuzzled. This show was produced by me and distributed in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. A special thanks to Cheyenne Brewer for editing the website, L. Akers for the incredible logo design, and to AnthroPuzzled's intern Fiona for the episode descriptions. The music is courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear of Sound and Picture. If you have any questions, you can reach me at abby.letzinger@anthropuzzled.com or as AnthroPuzzled on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time.